What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another Angle of Pursuit podcast, your fantasy football, sports betting, and NASCAR home. I'm your host, Kyle Robert. You follow me on Twitter at NotoriousKRO. With me, as always, it's Brian Twining. What's up, Brian?
What's up, Kyle? Man, I know we got one more game to go here in week one, but what a weekend. There's been so many injuries. There's been a bunch of upsets. I mean, we hit on it on our previous two shows. Like the home dogs were barking loud, and they definitely bit on Sunday.
Yeah. So we'll take advantage of Mondays to dive into kind of the week that was, and then use that information and whatnot to go look forward and figure out how we're going to approach the rest of the season. And I guess there's no better place to start than Brian. What was your most surprising result this week? I mean, we kind of talked about it a little bit, but I think for me, there's three games that come to mind. But what for you? What was the number one? Like, what was the most surprising?
Well, I guess in terms of just shock value, it wasn't really surprising to me because this is 2 years in a row now where I hammered this team on opening day, and that's got to be the Saints.
Yeah.
What they were able to do against this Packers team, I think, shows the genius that is Sean Payton on offense, and that we greatly undervalued how good the surrounding pieces were of this team over the last few years. I mean, their defense, they showed it yesterday. They're one of the most stout rush defenses in the NFL. They have possibly the best offensive line in football right now. I mean, they are going to be a problem. And let me remind everyone too, they get Michael Thomas back at some point in this season to just add to this offense that is going to be so much more dynamic with Jameis Winston.
Yeah, I think both of us love the Saints, and obviously it was one of our big bets early in the week. That being said, I don't think either of us saw it this bad. Like, I don't think we thought it would be
No.
this gross. And I mean, the Saints defense looks solid. Obviously, we don't expect Aaron Rodgers to play like that every week, but they're getting Marshawn Lattimore back. They traded for Bradley Roby, who should play this week. As you mentioned, Michael Thomas should be on his way back. Like, there's reasons to think this team might be trending this way and actually be a really, really good contender in the NFC, something that we both agreed on before the season.
Yep.
And was a big part of why we liked them. I think the second one that came to mind was the Houston Texans just dismantling the Jags. I think we all kind of had, it's Trevor Lawrence's first game and Urban Meyer's there, and we'll see what that
Yeah.
means. And I don't think 37-21 was the game we expected, with Houston getting up big, Tyrod looking great, Mark Ingram ending up with 28 carries, our boy Brandon Cooks, death taxes, and Brandon Cooks being fantasy relevant.
Better believe it.
Was a thing. And then I think the Titans getting dismantled at home 38-13 is a pretty surprising result. I saw some, optimism for what the Cardinals could be, and a lot of people like them getting the 3 points on the road, but I don't think a 38-13 blowout where the offense looks absolutely putrid and Taylor Lewan looks cooked and Chandler Jones is in the backfield, 5 sacks, forced fumble. Like, he was a problem yesterday. So I
Yes.
think a lot of what happened yesterday, you could kind of figure it out in your head, but I think those 3 games were the ones that were the most surprising or most kind of jaw dropping for sure.
Yeah, I definitely think that the Cardinals, the way that they won that game, for me, I think that's probably my biggest surprise. But I do
Yeah.
think in terms of what we saw, like coming into the game, I think that the Packers getting absolutely destroyed by New Orleans has put everyone back on notice that the Saints are for real.
So going forward, then, based on these results, obviously we both like New Orleans. Do you like New Orleans more now, like now that we saw it all come together and what Jameis could be, or do they kind of just a combination of a couple things where now you're still high on New Orleans, but now everybody else will probably come up kind of where we were?
I mean, I'm still high on New Orleans. I think they'll definitely compete for a playoff spot in the NFC. I mean, the NFC least is going to be a roller coaster all season. and then the NFC West is just going to beat up on each other. I mean, all those teams are really good. So I do
Yeah.
think that New Orleans will probably be in the playoff conversation, but I'm still interested to see when they play in a game where they're forced to throw the ball in situations that the team knows that they're throwing the ball, to see whether or not Jameis has really turned the corner. Because their lack of explosiveness on the outside may come back to bite them in the ass in those kind of games. So I'm not like jumping the gun betting any Super Bowl futures or anything like that with them, but I do think that I'm I'm slightly more optimistic about what this season can be with Winston, but I'm still holding out, getting crazy with any futures bets or anything like that with them.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think, it's easy to overreact to week 1. Like we spent a whole off season doing our prep and research and kind of getting an idea of where we think these teams should be. And then to kind of throw that all out the window after 1 week,
Yep.
fantasy or betting is kind of insane. I was really impressed with what the Eagles did yesterday. I think they put Jalen Hurts in a position to be successful, and he was awesome. 27 and 35, 264 yards, 3 touchdowns. Devonta Smith, Jalen Rager, Miles Sanders, Kenneth
Miles
Gainwell.
Sanders looked really good, by the
Yes,
way.
I'm really excited with what the Eagles offense might look like. If they can stay healthy, I think they could be competitive. We'll see what's up with Atlanta.
I was just gonna say the Falcons. I mean, now with Julio jettison to Tennessee, their offense is
Yeah,
Calvin Ridley and Kyle Pitts. I mean, and
right. But like even that, like yesterday, like Matt Ryan looked
did
horrendous.
not look good.
And when you have Calvin Ridley and you have Kyle Pitts and you have Mike Davis, like there was expectations for that game to be interesting and compelling and the
Yeah.
total to go over. And a lot of my DraftKings lineups had a lot of Calvin Ridley. Kyle Pitts was a value on DK. Mike
Yes.
Davis was even a little interesting, and they just laid a big old egg. So they're going to be a team I'm going to keep an eye on. I still have some optimism for what they can be. But it was definitely concerning. As you mentioned, yesterday was the day of home dogs. We mentioned this in our preview last week. Home dogs per John Ewing of BetMGM went 11-4 against the spread. We have one more home dog tonight.
Woo!
We're recording this before the Raiders are home dogs to Baltimore. I had the Raiders on my card. Yeah, home dogs look good. And they had some nice results yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this at length, just talking about, especially going into week 1, bookmakers and the pundits are basing these things off of kind of preseason and like previous years results, so it's really difficult to build these lines going into the first week. And I mean, you saw teams like Cincinnati, who made a ton of additions on the defensive side of the ball, be able to kind of bottle up Dalvin Cook, force Kirk Cousins into some situations he wasn't comfortable with, which saw them jump out to a huge lead and eventually win in overtime. You saw Houston. I mean, like we said, everyone expected Jacksonville to go in there and roll the Texans as being like the worst roster in the NFL, but it was the complete opposite script there. And I mean, I think that had much to do with Urban Meyer's unwillingness to run the ball early on in the game, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, it was really interesting to watch the home underdogs yesterday perform as well as they did, and it was just goes to show you that with the fans back in the stands, there is a lot of value to be had with home field advantage. So I think going forward, you'll start to see some more adjustments by odds makers, and you won't see those lines like that. But it's an opportunity to take advantage of early on in the season before the market corrects itself towards the 2021 versions of these teams.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Just making sure I'm getting my information. Yeah, so NFL underdogs were 11-4 against the spread yesterday. It's the best week 1 performance since 2003, which is pretty crazy. That's per Bet Labs. The public also got pounded yesterday. 11-4 against the spread if you backed the opposite side of the public teams, which is interesting. All sets up for me to have a nice night with the Raiders after After a whatever week, we can recap our picks from the week that was before we get into the week that is. I took New Orleans. Obviously, that was an easy W, rocking chair finish. I don't know why I go against Seattle. Like I don't know why. The Colts, I really like them, but so much of what I found out kind of as that game approached in terms of the Seattle being really good in the Eastern time zone, Seattle traveling really well and performing really well, and actually struggling against the spread at home. I thought the Colts could keep it interesting. They could not. They got torched. Um,
I
and
think
yet
it
again,
was
we'll talk week 2 lines, but I feel like I might be back to that. I'm on the Raiders tonight, so we'll see what that has to entail. And my boy Chase Edmonds hit
oh, that was
the
an easy
over
cover.
by halftime. His total for rushing plus receiving was 63 and a half. He finished the game with 63 rushing yards. So that was another one that was an easy cash. What about for you?
Well, I just wanted to hit on the Colts thing. I think the loss of Xavier Rhodes really played, majorly into what happened yesterday with Russell Wilson just being able to air it out
Yeah.
deep all game. But then moving on from there, yeah, I mean, my card is looking great right now. Carolina, they lucked out, covered at the end of that game with the Jets missing the 2-point conversion attempt. Carolina got that late touchdown in the first half after a penalty, got them within, in the red zone there to go over the first half total. My 4-leg teaser hit, and thankfully I bet the teaser because San Francisco gave a lot of people a
20, they were
bad
up
beat yesterday.
24. They were up
Oh man.
24 with 2 minutes to go in that game.
Yeah.
And Jared Goff and company kicked that door in. It's insane. Like
Yeah.
I,
And
that
then
that number steamed up like crazy. If you got it at 7, I think, or 7.5 when we originally talked about it, you were fine. But if you got it anything over 8, you were donezo. And with up 24, 2 minutes to go, there should be no reason for you to even sweat that game.
well, and that just goes to show you, it's another home dog who, I mean, yeah, early on it was clearly San Francisco's defense was dominating that game, but
Yeah.
Detroit, they're going to be one of those teams this year that are frustrating to bet against because they're going to be playing from behind a lot. There's going to be a lot of garbage time points. Dan Campbell is one of those hard nosed. I mean, he wants people to be biting kneecaps off of people. So they're going to be that team that you probably want to avoid on a weekly basis in terms of betting. And then when you looked at what Arizona and Tennessee did, if I didn't tease that down, you miss on the total there
That
because
that
Tennessee did nothing.
game being falling short of the over by half a point is wild.
Yep.
But that's the thing is a lot. The Vegas lines are usually so good, especially in the NFL market where there's so much action both ways. That number gets dialed down to like a perfect spot that you really it's really a matter of inches or that
Yep.
to cover or not. Um,
Yeah, and then I had the Dolphins. I mean, I didn't even need to tease that one. They wound up winning
no,
in New England, and then the Rams that
yeah.
could have just been whatever. But
Yeah,
yeah,
my over under on that Pats Dolphins game did not end up coming through, which is very disappointing. That game, and I felt like I had a chance at trying to get it at the end. I needed a couple touchdowns, but the right result was probably the under, and I was on the wrong side there. So,
hey, that happens.
2-2 week with the potential to have a winning week if the Raiders cover. You crushed it and are off to a screaming start. So,
And I
um,
still have Lamar tonight over
we'll
one and
see
a
what
half
we'll see what
touchdowns.
Lamar does. See what that Lamar passing numbers does. Let's talk a few key injuries. Obviously, as our fantasy life aficionado and bet spurts guy, where I'm going to lean on you for a little bit of the information. But let's talk about some key injuries and see if it's affecting our kind of our thoughts about teams. So we'll start in Washington, where Ryan Fitzpatrick is headed to the IR. Is officially Taylor Heineke's season. We saw him in the playoffs a little bit last year. Looked okay. Obviously, Washington has some pieces that we really like. In terms of going from Fitzpatrick to Heineke, are you going to be a little more pessimistic on what this team could be offensively, and when you're betting them week to week, a little more standoffish in terms of backing them in particular spots?
Yeah, I think this team, as a favorite with Tyler Heineke there, I think is probably going to be a complete fade. Like this weekend, they're going up against New York. New York's a 3.5 point dog, and regardless of what Daniel Jones does, how many mistakes he makes, New York's defense is good enough to keep this game extremely close.
Yeah.
I mean, getting a field goal and a half, I think, is the spot. And I'm on the under. Like, if you wanted to parlay the Giants getting a field goal and a half and then under 41, I expect this total to be bet under a few points by the
Yeah.
time kickoff comes. So, like, Washington is a team for me with the change at quarterback. They're going to be less explosive on offense. There's going to be probably some more boom plays because of the scrambling ability by Heineke, but it's going to be a more condensed offense. It's going to be a lot of running, a lot of short passing. Yeah, I'm not betting them as a favorite pretty much at
Yeah,
all
I mean
going forward.
you can get the Giants as a 4-point underdog at FanDuel Sportsbook, a number I really like. I we'll talk the rest of the week 2 lines here in a bit, but I'm with you on that number. That being said, I don't know if it's a huge downgrade from Fitzmagic to Heineke, maybe in terms of a total. I would be a little less optimistic, but in terms of what this offense should do up and down the field, I think I think with that defense, specifically the front seven and the
Yeah.
ability to run the ball with Antonio Gibson, I think they'll be okay in the long run. Jerry Judy, that
Oh,
ankle injury looked really brutal. Supposedly he's fine-ish. It's an ankle sprain. There's no broken bones. There's no nut. They're saying 4 to 6 weeks is kind of the estimated timetable. That being said, it is a ligament issue in the ankle that is always a slow return. But in terms of what Denver has depth at, I think receiver might be their best spot. We saw KJ Hamler pop. We saw Tim Patrick get involved. They have two tight ends with Alberto and Noah Fant. There's plenty of places for Teddy to go. And Teddy actually looked really impressive yesterday, taking some deep shots, um, spreading the ball around. Melvin Gordon looks spry. I'm a lot more optimistic on. I know it was the Giants, but that defense is pretty solid, like you mentioned. While Daniel Jones makes some plays that make you really frustrated, especially as somebody who went in as
Daniel
hard as I
Jones is
did.
going to Daniel Jones.
I'm still optimistic on what Denver showed yesterday, and I think they could be that team in that division that gives that kind of pops, and all of a sudden, then they're like a borderline wild card team.
Yeah, I minus Jerry Judy. I mean, like you said, you hate to say that it really doesn't impact the team, that much, but
Yeah,
I really don't think that it's going to affect what Denver is going to do this season. And that's going to be run the ball with those two guys in the backfield. Teddy Bridgewater is going to play efficient quarterback. He's not going to turn the ball over. He's going to hit open guys. I think you see a little more like jump ball scenarios with Cortland Sutton on the outside now because teams are probably likely going to be stacking the box a little bit more minus Judy on the outside. But I mean, that defense is so good. Von Miller looked great yesterday. I think that they're going to be a team that I'm backing early this season until especially the oddsmakers realize like how good
yeah,
that defense
yeah.
is with a quarterback like Bridgewater. I mean, just looking ahead real fast, they're a 6 point favorite on the road in Jacksonville, which I think is going to go up. This is going to be the situation of the Niners in Detroit where you want to take this now before this gets close to double digits.
I feel like that might be a little aggressive, but we can talk about that one too because I think.
Urban
Um,
Meyer is going to struggle.
so are the Jags going to be the team that we actually thought like we kind of talked about Houston and a few other teams being like the garbage. Maybe Jackson. I don't know. I don't know. I'm a little more optimistic. We'll go over that game here in a bit. Um, let's talk the Niners because I'm obviously
Uh,
local to San Francisco. I'm up north in Sacramento. A lot of my family and friends are hardcore Niners fans. I'm really tuned into that team. And yesterday was a weird situation. Shanahan made his comments about, well, Sherfield's been better, and Ayuk's been injured, and Ayuk was actually replaced. There's a lot going on, a lot of theorizing.
yep.
Nothing has officially been set in stone. The one rumor I heard that I think I buy into the most was that both Trey Sermon and Brandon Ayuk missed curfew, and that was a big part of their lack of play yesterday. Obviously, Elijah Mitchell was incredible and looked every bit the part of a guy who could take over as the feature back in this offense. And as we've said over and over, Brian, in terms of fantasy, backing the guy that nobody wants in this offense is the way to look. We'll see what happens this week. I think the next couple of days are going to be really interesting. Ayuk had 0 targets. He obviously had some routes and he returned some punts, but didn't do much. Sermon being a healthy scratch, I thought was incredibly interesting.
That was crazy.
But we'll see. I still think there's a while to go, and I think this situation will clear itself as we were getting onto the podcast. Raheem Mostert will miss some significant time. Break down
8
that injury.
weeks, everyone.
So what was the injury, Brian?
I guess loose cartilage in his knee.
Yeah,
it's gone for 8 weeks.
Yeah, so
that's
he's
a
gonna be out a
long
while.
time.
So Elijah Mitchell, vault him to the top of your fantasy ads and whatnot. On the defensive side, Jason Verrett getting hurt, blew out his ACL. Poor guy.
That poor guy.
He was playing when the game was kind of in hand. But this is a bad thing for the Niners, who were already had issues in the back end.
Yeah,
a team that if you're going to be looking to kind of, if you find an offense that you think could, even if it's late, put up enough points to come in the back door. If you think those games against Seattle, against the Rams, who looked incredible last night, Arizona, are going to be incredibly competitive. They're talking to Richard Sherman, who apparently they've been in contact with. And if that's your answer, it could be kind of gross. The front seven looks great and will put up plenty of pressure. The offense looked good. It was the first time since I think 2012 where the Niners had a 300-yard passer, a 100-yard rusher, and a 100-yard receiver with Jimmy G, Elijah Mitchell, and Debo looking incredible. So, offense looked good. Defense looked great for about
early
2.5 quarters and then kind of fell apart. Will be interesting to see. But yeah, I think fading the Niners a little bit could be an interesting proposition if they don't get that back end fixed. We'll keep an eye on that for sure. So those are your injuries. Let's jump into the week 2 betting board and take a look at some of those lines, Brian. As we've already jumped into a couple different ones. You're optimistic on what Washington can do, or on what the Giants can do, even on the road. I'm a little more optimistic on the Jags. What I like, but what I'm going to start doing each and every week is making my projected betting lines for each week's games, and then kind of comparing it to what the actual line is, and see where I can find some value, see what I can see. 3 lines popped out to me. I made Carolina a short favorite at home, 2.5. They are a 3-point dog at home this week. Is this an overreaction to what New Orleans is, or am I a little too optimistic on what the Panthers can be?
This game is extremely tricky for me to kind of prognosticate. I mean, I love the Panthers yesterday against the Jets, and while I thought that they controlled the game early, the lack of execution by the offense kind of in the red zone was a little bit confusing to me with Christian McCaffrey. I think he only had like 3 touches down there. They for some reason just wanted to run the ball with him and or throw to the outside rather than utilizing his great skills in space against a less than stellar defense. And now they're going to be going up against the Saints defense, which is really good. Now, that being said, though, the Panthers led the NFL in pressures yesterday, quarterback hits, and
that defense is significantly improved. They've been adding young assets. Jeremy Chin is a beast. The front seven is much better, and I think it'll be a really good test. It's already gone out to 3.5 in some spots. I can almost guarantee you Carolina will plus 3.5 will be on my betting card come Thursday.
Yeah, this is probably a game where, like I said with New Orleans, I don't want to overreact. I don't want to start crowning them anything yet, as what was that Dennis Green said back in the day. But this will probably be a wait and see for me. I'll probably avoid this on my card to kind of see which teams show up. If we get a similar performance out of New Orleans that we saw against Green Bay, then yes, I think we can start considering them one of the favorites in the NFC South and to compete. But I think Carolina has a legit shot to cover the 3.5. And for me, like I said, I'll be avoiding this one. For me, I think the line that jumped out to the most outside of the Giants getting the 3.5 there is the Bears being a 2.5 point favorite at home against the Bengals. Now, I know Cincinnati, yes, they're the Bengals, and we all expected them to suck and that defense to just be trash. But what do the Bears do on offense other than run with David Montgomery that looks like they're going to be able to compete with a team that has the weapons that Cincinnati has? I think this
Yeah.
is a spot where Cincinnati starts the year 2-0 possibly.
Yeah, so I was a little more optimistic on the Bengals and a little bullish on, not so optimistic on Minnesota. And I was tweeting about it last night. It's the Bears. They're like an 8-leg parlay where everything has to go right for them to cash, right, to get in the end zone.
Yep,
Where
it's true.
teams like Cincinnati and the Rams and a few of the other teams, they have that Jamar Chase 70-yard touchdown in the bag. They have Joe Mixon taking it to the house. Like, as good as David Montgomery looked yesterday, and as much as I love Allen Robinson and Darnell Mooney, with this team, the way they call plays, if Andy Dalton is going to be their quarterback, it's just they have to do so much, and they're so methodical, have to march down the seat, and over the course of a full game, that's not going to be a consistent way to score points.
No.
You have to take shots. You have to
Yep.
give defenses different looks. And when you have Darnell Mooney and you have the weapons they have, like, you need to take those shots. And Andy Dalton's shown he can do it before. Now, if he can't do it anymore, then you need to obviously make the switch to Justin Fields. And I don't understand the random, here's Justin Fields doing a pitch, or here's Justin Fields throwing one pass and then going off the field. Like, if Fields gives you that option, make him your starter. If he's not, then just roll with Dalton and let him work in practice and get. I understand you want him to get those live bullets, but it seems so random and arbitrary. Like, I really wanted to be excited for Matt Nagy taking a step forward with a full offense, but if this is going to be his offense, then I'm gonna be fading the Bears all season long.
Yeah, I have to take the large L here. Andy Dalton looks cooked, as you would
Yeah,
say. His arm strength is anemic. I
yeah,
mean, there was a few times yesterday where he was throwing simple wide receiver screens, and he was bouncing the ball to the guy, from the middle of the hash marks
yeah.
to the number, which should be a throw that every NFL quarterback should make. I can't make it, but every NFL quarterback should be able to make that
Yeah.
make
I
that
mean,
throw.
having Aaron Donald and that defense in your face every play is not ideal. And
But
the Bears offensive line, that was already a little bit of an issue. Is
so that
already
was going to be my next point. Like, their offensive line was already starting two brand new tackles. Now they're already down Jason Peters, and his backup got hurt during the game as well. So this offensive line got even worse.
yeah,
And Cincinnati, during the offseason, they made some moves to bolster their front seven, and it showed yesterday against Minnesota, putting a ton of pressure on Cousins and limiting Dalvin Cook's ability to run the ball. So I think the Bengals early on this season are going to be one of my favorites to
yeah,
back with how explosive this offense is.
yeah. And if you liked Cincinnati like Brian and I, the line opened at 4. It's already down to 3, and it's heading to 2.5 in a lot of spots. So
Yep.
jump on it now. So Brian, there was 2 other games that jumped out to me. I'm in on the Colts again. I don't know why. I thought
Uh-oh.
I set the line as a short home favorite, -1.5. They're 4-point underdogs right now. That feels like a lot. Like, I know the Rams looked amazing, and maybe I'm setting myself up for another Bear situation where it takes so much for the Colts, but at least, like, they have the Zach Pascal big touchdown, and they have some pieces of Philip Dorsett. Carson Wentz wasn't a complete train wreck. Obviously, Seattle's defense isn't nearly as good as the Rams, so maybe that'll be a problem. I do love what the Rams did with Jalen Ramsey, by the way, putting him in the box, letting him be physical.
Yep.
I think that helps their defense a lot. And then the other one was Atlanta. Like, I don't know what to do with Atlanta. They're playing Tampa Bay as 2 touchdown underdogs.
Oh,
That, like, I know Tampa looked great, but Dallas was able to go toe to toe. If Atlanta's offense is what we thought it could be, they could easily cover that number. So that's another place where I'm kind of looking, especially if you can get it at 13 and a half. I feel really good about it. 12.5, not so much. That might be a little too close, but those were the other two that really jumped out to me.
Yeah, so that line with Tampa was definitely interesting when I first saw it. But I do think that this is going to be the get right game for the Buccaneers. Atlanta's offense, for as good as it is, they're nowhere near the level of what Dallas brings to the table.
Yeah.
And I would go out on a limb and say that as bad as the Cowboys defense was last year, they're probably better than what Atlanta has on the field right now. So I think this is a spot where Tampa Bay trucks the Falcons back to Georgia. We see the rumors of Matt Ryan's demise begin to get louder.
If Justin Fields is good and Matt Ryan is a mess,
could you imagine?
That's going to be a problem, because they could have easily had him in. And
it's just like, yeah, it's that thing again where I remember how upset I was when the Cowboys took the shiny toy CeeDee Lamb over a defensive player or another offensive lineman where they've been struggling with injuries. And it goes to show you, yes, it's nice to have those pieces or depth at the skill positions, but they don't help you win games when basically the scaffolding of your team is crumbling.
Yeah.
Which is what happens in Atlanta.
If you can find players like CeeDee Lamb or Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, I agree, but
they're a game changer. It's a lot easier to find the scaffolding pieces and put that stuff together.
I don't know. Look at the Chargers, for instance. Yeah. They got that Rashawn Slater, or I think that's his first name.
Yeah, Rashawn
tackle.
Slater, yeah. But they also brought in Lindsley. They also brought in some other pieces.
However, Slater had like the most impressive performance of any offensive tackle in the NFL yesterday, going up against Chase Young, Marcus Sweat, that probably the most ferocious D-line in the NFL. And they finally got it right there, knowing we don't need any more receivers. We don't need any running backs. We don't need any other toys. We need a guy who's just going to hold down the fort.
Yeah. I just placed my second bet of the week. I am taking the Jets. Our friends offshore have them at +6. What did we see from the Patriots yesterday that makes us think they deserve to be almost touchdown favorites on the road? I mean, Mac Jones was fine.
Mac Jones looked awesome.
I mean, he was fine. They scored 16 points. Damian Harris was fine getting the volume. The defense is okay.
I think the Patriots are still going to have an issue of blowing the top off of defenses because Aguilar never got deep. They didn't really utilize both tight ends in the passing game very much. So I'm slightly confused about what exactly the point of bringing them in if you're not going to use their best skills.
Yeah.
But
Corey Davis
the Jets were good too.
Yeah.
I mean, they looked okay.
Solid. I think there's a potential that the Jets offense is actually better than Miami, or at least what we saw, initially last week. So, I'm excited. The running back is kind of a muddied situation, but Elijah Moore looks solid. Corey Davis looked great. There's a lot to be excited about. So
Corey Davis, baby.
Yeah, I
still holding shares in his Dynasty.
I have my share in Dynasty. So, any other games that immediately jump out to you? Any other numbers that make that are a little bit of a head scratcher to you, Brian?
Well, we talked about this Thursday last week or Friday. The Cowboys and the Chargers, that game's up to 3 points for Dallas getting 3 on the road in LA. It's really hard for me to talk about my team being a Cowboys fan, but I do think that what they showed against Tampa Bay, I don't think that's going to be a fluke. I think that they're gonna get more into the running game with Zeke, which I think will control the pace of games a little bit more. The Chargers offense is great, but they didn't really show the ability to go up top on Washington, where that's their weakest spot. I know and Herbert had a lot of time yesterday, so I think this is a spot where if that continues to climb over 3 for me, I think Dallas is the play. If it's under, I'm probably avoiding the game. Just I can't bank on the Chargers covering at home. Even though I did like the Chargers team total this year. I do think they're a playoff team, but it's hard for me to take it either way with less than a field goal.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. If I can get a field goal with Dallas, I'm interested. I also think it's a good buying opportunity on my Titans, as you mentioned. Backing your own team is never fun and not
It's a
something that
lose-lose
it's
situation.
typically yeah hard to stomach because you don't want to be that guy that backs your. But like I think that is a good spot. I think yes they looked awful in week one, but I think they're also a much better team than they looked in week one. I think there's a lot of stuff they can fix. And as we mentioned, Seattle looks great on the road, comes home, not so much. Even if Seattle wins this game, it's probably a field goal game either way. Um, and the Titans can cover. I mean, 5.5, 6, I feel like is a bit too aggressive. So we talked some games, we talked some news, we talked some information. Brian, is there any games as of now that you are betting?
Yeah, I actually have two that I've already placed wagers on, and that's going to be Denver on the road in Jacksonville at 6, like I talked about early,
Okay.
because that's definitely going to climb. That's going to be the 49ers situation. And then I'm taking the Browns minus
Yeah.
12 and a half right now on one of our offshore places. They're currently sitting 12 and a half at most spots. This is going to go over 2 touchdowns. I think
Yeah.
Cleveland is going to absolutely destroy Houston. I think people may slightly keep this within a reasonable line because of what Houston did to Jacksonville with the expectations of what Jacksonville was going to do, which is a huge mistake.
Yeah.
Houston has nothing on offense that scares me in going up against Cleveland. Cleveland was beating Kansas City by freaking 2 scores yesterday in Arrowhead, for gosh sakes. So
Yeah, no, Browns looked every bit the part.
I'm
And I know
I'm
you don't.
laying the Browns all the way up to like
Yeah.
16 and a half here.
I think this could be a really interesting spot. I think had Jacksonville beaten Houston yesterday, this is like a 17-point line, and we're talking about hammering the Browns at that point. So getting it under 2 touchdowns, I like that call quite a bit. As I mentioned, I like the Jets. I like Jets a lot. +6 is a number if you can get it. I would hammer. I've already hammered. If it trends towards 5 or even 4.5, I might be out at that point. But nothing New England did yesterday screams home a road favorite of almost a touchdown. I like Carolina a lot. I got it at 3.5, so I jumped
Man,
on it. If it's 3, I might be a little more patient and see what happens. See if people are really excited about what New Orleans showed yesterday. But I'm optimistic on Carolina's defense. I think their offense will figure stuff out. And I don't know that, as great as New Orleans looked in week one, that's who they are, especially with their current roster. This could be a low scoring, ugly game where
there was also
getting, go ahead.
there was also news yesterday that the reason why Marshawn Lattimore came out after halftime with a cast on was he tore a ligament in his hand.
Yeah.
So there's a possibility that he has to have some like a minor surgery. Maybe he misses this week. And yes, they are getting Bradley Roby, but he hasn't even practiced with the team yet, being suspended. So I
Yeah,
think
Roby's supposed to practice this week and could be fine. Yeah, no, I know that Lattimore has the hand issue, but I think I'm trying to find it. But it sounds like everything I know, everything they know, they expect him to play this week. Now, if that changes, that could be something too. But yeah, if he doesn't play and Roby's kind of figuring stuff out, I could see Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore taking advantage of that situation. I think 3.5 is too many points on and I could look stupid, but like I don't know that there's a massive difference between Sam Darnold and Jameis Winston as much as I like both of them. So I think that's a spot to jump in. Um, Cool. Those are our plays as of now. We'll be back on Thursday to break down our best bets for the week, break down some player props. Brian and I hopefully will continue to crush that. That's Brian Twining.